Hey there, audio friends. Quick review for you today. We are looking at a little DAC from Fosi. This is the GR40. You can see there's a couple of tubes up there. There's a Bluetooth antenna. We'll get into all that here in a moment. Just so you're aware, Fosi did send this to me free of charge. They're not telling me what to say. They're not asking anything besides, I don't have to send it back. So the GR40, right? We've got let's just take a look around the unit. We'll get into some specs. Of course, we'll get into some sound. Then ultimately, we'll talk about, is it worth it? Where does it land kind of in the current audio landscape? And is it for you? All right, so on the front, first thing you're gonna notice, we got 3 dials. I do really like, I have to say, Fosi's like orange-black color scheme. I think black boxes get a little boring after a while. But I also don't want anything too crazy. I think this is nice in that, it's black, but it's got a couple of orange accents. I think they've nailed that color scheme, and it matches all their stuff currently, right? Form factor, it's pretty small. It's right in line with any of the other like typical Fosi, like small, kind of their lower end or entry level stuff. The volume knob here is a button as well, which allows you to turn it on, turn it off, do your input select, that type of stuff. You can see there's tone controls on there. They work just fine. One thing that threw me a little bit is that they do have kind of a neutral spot that it slots into, but it's a little past noon, which I think is interesting. And then the other thing is like it comes with both of those turned all the way down, which I think is a mistake, because that means if you don't mess with the tone controls right away, it doesn't sound very good. So you have to turn them up to that neutral spot. Is just something to be aware of. I always wish that for devices like this that have tone controls, I wish there's just like a toggle, where you can just turn them off, and that way you're getting a clean signal that isn't being messed with. That's not present here, but I do think that's something that they should consider including in the future. You'll also notice here there is a little 3.5 millimeter jack, so you can run some headphones off this. I used my XTC closed with this for a little bit. Again, we'll talk more about that with sound when we get into it. On the back, you've got your power in. It's just a little 12 volt, and when I say a little 12 volt, I mean a little 12 volt. It's running about 1500 milliamps, 12 volt. This guy's not very big. It is consistent with the other products in this line, as far as I can tell, which we'll talk about that here in a minute as well. So if you wanted to know, the downside of this, like we're talking like a meter cable here. It's very, very short cable, just to be aware. Okay, so then you got USB-C in, you've got your Bluetooth antenna, you've got optical in, coax in, RCA out, all that stuff's pretty standard affair. One thing that you probably want to know is what kind of tubes it comes with. I mean, these are just kind of the generic Jan 56, 54W tubes that come in a lot of these kind of cheaper Chinese devices. It's probably one of those things where you're not really going to replace tubes like this. If you get into replacing these tubes, you're going to be spending, a third of the price of the unit itself. And with this particular type of tube style, I haven't ever really noticed any of the devices that use them having super significant sound change. There's some exceptions out there, but I probably wouldn't plan on doing much tube rolling myself. Let's talk a few specs here. So for the headphone output, you're looking at 250 milliwatts at 16 ohms, 150 milliwatts at 32, 32 milliwatts at 250 ohms, and then 20 milliwatts at 300 ohms. It's not very powerful, I guess is what it comes down to. It's going to get you listening if you've got something that's fairly easy to drive. Like I said, my XTC closed, I have the 64 ohm version, so it drove those just fine. I don't think you're not gonna want to run anything that's like a 250, 300 ohm headphone on this. I don't think that stuff's gonna get very good results. But if you've got a relatively easy to drive headphone, it'll get you listening at least. And I thought it sounded pretty good with the XTC. Okay, so let's get into kind of like using the device. I found it to function fairly well. The biggest omission, I think, is that they don't have a remote that goes with it, and I was mainly trying to use this with my actual stereo system where I'm sitting on my couch, so that wasn't great for me. If it's sitting on your desk, obviously you've got no issues there. I will point out that Fosi has sent me another device that isn't released yet. It's just a straight up preamp, and it does come with a remote, and you can see it matches with this system. So there's solutions out there, but then again, you're spending more money, right? So I'll have a review coming out for that towards the end of this month, but you can get around it, but I think a remote would have been nice. As far as my listening experience goes, I would say this is probably right in line with a product of this price, like where you would think the audio lands. It's definitely not terrible audio, but it also isn't super impressive either. I found it to be a little bit compressed sounding and a little bit forward sounding compared to my Soundcause SGD1, which is what I usually have hooked up to kind of my main home theater setup down here. It just doesn't do kind of like the spatial information, the nuance, the balance. Like, it just wasn't quite up to that level, which again, that's like a $500 DAC, the Soundcause is. So I mean, I think if you're just looking for a cheap audio setup to get you up and listening, I think this works and doesn't sound bad. But I don't think it does anything particularly too special either, would be my opinion of it. Priced at around $80, I think, you know, it's probably adequately priced. I think where you're gonna run into some decisions to make is, do you wanna go with this, or would you rather spend like a little bit more money and get up to like the $150 range, where you can get something like Fosi's ZD3, which I think sounds better. It has HDMI ARC, which is super convenient, and it comes with a remote, and I think just looks a little bit better too, and it's kind of, you know, a step above this. So again, I think if it were my money and up to me, I would go for the ZD3 over this. But if you're looking to just get up and running, if you want the headphone jack, if you're gonna use it on your desk, I think this is an okay place to start. But I think you're probably gonna outgrow it fairly quickly, unless it's kind of like a secondary system, you know, that you're using at the office, or you're using in your bedroom, or you know what I mean, something like that. Yeah, I don't think we need to beat this one to death. It's an okay product for what it is and for the price that it's at. I don't think it's gonna blow anybody's socks off, but like I said many times now, it will get you up and listening, and it does a reasonably good job at that, as long as you don't need a remote, you don't need HDMI ARC, and you're not trying to drive, you know, power-hungry headphones. I think you'll be okay. The other thing that I would note, though, is I don't think this is probably like an IEM listening device. Even on my XTC Close, there was a noticeable noise floor, which, you know, when you're listening to music, it's not really a factor unless you're listening really, really low volumes. But certainly, not that I tried IEMs on it, but I bet it would be enough that it probably would get on my nerves anyway. So that's something to be aware of as well. And with that being said, I think we'll wrap this up. Thanks to Fosi for sending it out. Stay tuned for reviews of kind of some more Fosi products that might mesh well with this little guy if you're interested in that. As always, I appreciate you watching. Hopefully I'll catch you in the next one.